Man, I don't even want to know um the psychic toll of being an American right now, man. It's just there's so much violence in that country. And I remember well, of course I do. It just happened like recently when we had the terrorist attack by Islamic State in Bondi, which took place here in Sydney in Australia. It shook me up, man. It shook up so many people I know. Like I was talking to a few mates of mine, and they were like, "That's fucking crazy." Because terrorist attacks and those kinds of shootings and stuff you rarely hear about um, in Australia. And then I think I read some statistics somewhere that there's a mass shooting, which means more than three casualties uh, uh, that takes place in the U.S. every single day. And then on top of that, all of this ICE shootings and stuff, man. I mean, I have no interest in visiting America anytime soon. But obviously, I have a lot of like American friends, and just like it's just such a big cultural powerhouse, and it affects the rest of the world. And when I'm seeing what's going on in the U.S., I'm like, gosh, the structural violence, like the cultural violence that's been created in modern America. I can't imagine what that's like for the ordinary American just living their life, the kind of psychic toll. I don't recommend checking the news every morning because honestly, I don't know where to go from here. Um, but no, I mean, obviously, if you guys aren't in the loop, there was another ICE shooting, another innocent person. I don't want to, kind of share any details on the shooting because I really don't know the kind of facts of the matter. I think apparently this person was a nurse. I think a 37-year-old man. So that was another shooting, and I was thinking about, you know, obviously what's taking place right now in in the U.S. is a kind of neo-fascist movement, and what happens when you push kind of right-wing ideology to its extreme, and essentially what unfolds through kind of a right-wing ideology or right-wing politics, right? And the thing is, I think for the rest of the world, for the rest of the Western world, where you know, broadly speaking, at least nominally, we believe in liberalism, we believe in democracy, we believe in the sovereignty of individuals and all of that, and I think those are good things. I've said this many times on the podcast and on the live streams too. I'm a big fan of the Enlightenment, and I do think that that was a unique moment that took place in Europe, especially the German Enlightenment, and you know, English common law, all of that, right? So I think what we're seeing in the US is really an harbinger of what's to come um, in the rest of the Western world. Unfortunately, it looks like Farage and Reform are going to win in the UK. I feel for my friends across the pond because that's going to be painful. And as an Australian, uh, my first thought was okay. What like okay? So let me put this in a bit of context for the non-Australian viewers. W- Last year, essentially our left-wing party, or you could call them our centrist party, the Labour Party, uh, had a landslide victory, probably the biggest victory ever in an Australian election. Sir Anthony Albanese and the Labour Party, the ALP, had a huge win, and according to certain projections, they're probably going to be in power for at least another 2 or 3 terms, so almost 10 years. There's no, imminent threat, let's say, of there being a right wing party or like a far right party coming into power in Australia. That being said, though, you never know, and the reason you never know is because in Australia, the what was kind of mainstream traditional right-wing party, the Liberal Party, LNP, or called the Coalition, they've completely broken apart. They're in shambles. Recently, this group called this faction called the Nationals, they left the party, and we really don't have like a mainstream right party. But then the problem is, and this is why it's scary, and I think it should be concerning to those of us who love our country and believe in, again, generally speaking, a liberal democracy and having a decent life, and giving everyone a fair go, as it's said. Gosh, I can't talk. All right, bit of coffee. So because kind of the mainstream right-wing party is in shambles, and there really isn't like a mainstream right in that way, the party that's getting all the support and going up in the polls is this party called One Nation. That's kind of like our Reform, or like our MAGA in Australia. Certainly not as extreme and radical, I don't think, as MAGA. Like, people like Pauline Hanson. Yeah, she's a far-right politician. She's kind of a kook, but I still wouldn't say. I mean, she certainly is like a populist right, like Trump, but not to the kind of sadistic level of what we're seeing right now by the contemporary American Republicans. Like, not the kind of like the complete, like, this like, innocent Americans getting shot in the street, and the kind of what's going on with the eyes, like to the level of it's just like cruelty for the sake of cruelty, not at that level. But my concern is because there's no, like, let's call it like a very like establishment center-right party, or everyone's being, all the people that generally were supporters of the Liberals or the Coalition are going towards the far-right party, which is the Nationals. The One Nation, Pauline Hanson's party. And their whole thing is typical, right? Anti-immigrant, anti whatever, all these made up things, woke, anti-Muslim, probably, and some of them are even anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, and the whole thing. Well, not Pauline Hanson. I think Pauline Hanson is a Zionist, so that makes it worse, actually, in my eyes. But I mean, in my view, Zionism itself is anti-Jewish, but that's a whole other conversation. And the problem is, I'm hoping for better days in America. I'm hoping that America will heal from this. I've no idea how the US can come back from this. It really is a sign of a failing empire, and I feel for, again, the average ordinary American who lives there, because I can't imagine waking up to this every single day. If it was going on in my own country, it would just feel really, one would feel so despondent, and it's so dispiriting. But one thing I think, as the rest of the world, and here I'm speaking again in Australia, because this is kind of the country that I'm familiar with, is this is where what we are seeing in the US is an harbinger of what's to come in the rest of the Western world, if we keep, and when I mean Western, I mean including Europe, but even, I mean, look, what's the West, right? Including even Asia, India, all of these countries, right? If we keep voting for right-wing parties, or like these right-wing populist types who always scapegoat, whether it's trans people, whether it's migrants, Muslims, or whether it's Jews, the anti-Semitic right, there's always an element of scapegoating. There's always this cut you do. It always leads to this. It always leads to violence. Because the truth is, not to get overly metaphysical and philosophical here, as Hegelian philosophy tells us, the contradictions of any society, the antagonisms, the rifts, the problems of any society, they aren't something caused by the outsider. And what right-wing politics wants us to focus on is the outsider, the person on the boat, the immigrant, the gay person or the trans person, the person that probably doesn't dress the way that I do. But the problems of society are imminent. It's internal. So if in Australia, if you want to really focus on the problems we have, yes, the housing crisis partially it's due to international students and migration, all of that. But a big part of that is the way that our housing market is set up with negative gearing, capital gains taxes and all of that. And yeah, like a part of that is also just like simple practical, well, not simple, but practical engineering solutions, like building more houses, creating more supply, while at the same time not treating housing as a commodity or like as an asset, as a financial instrument, like the way the rest of the Western world has treated real estate, a way to make money, essentially. So these are like changing these things are way harder and way more. I myself, I'm still learning about, and personally, I don't think just simply taxing the rich, even though I do believe we should tax the rich, I simply don't believe just like that this broadly saying tax the rich is just going to work. Because to fix these internal problems, systemic problems in our society, they take a lot of thinking, a lot of work, and yes, probably to a certain extent, a lot of sacrifice. But then what the right sells is a lot more easier. It's a lot. It's saying nothing about your life has to change. Nothing about how your worldview, what you prioritize, what you value. None of those things have to change. Just blame the finger on the other, on the outsider. And the fact is, as we've seen in the US, it doesn't work. It's what ICE is doing right now is only going to make things worse in America. And eventually, when you keep pushing that, it leads to violence. And here's something else I was thinking about. Like, I think a lot of people, most of us in the left, talk about like that this kind of scapegoating mechanism, blaming the outsider, it always leads to violence. No. It's not that it leads to violence. It's not consequential. It is violent in itself. The act of scapegoating itself is a violent act. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're, I know that majority of my viewers are based in the UK and in the US, but it's, I mean, this message goes to really, it's a universal kind of idea that I've been thinking about. The idea is that like they really, if you think by voting for a populist politician, whoever it is, Pauline Hanson or Farage, or well, now Trump, they had already in power, but in those countries, or even like a Modi in India, if you think that is gonna, and then that politician kind of like, I don't know, punishing migrants or trans people or people in the left who are protesting against the actions of the government, if you think that that's going to be the panacea, that's going to be the remedy to all of the ills of your society, think again. And yeah, I mean, to my fellow Australians, like, I'm telling you, by I don't know, by voting for Pauline Hanson or supporting One Nation, or even buying into all the rhetoric, all of these, what's this guy's name, Drew, whatever, he was on recently. He went to, gosh, man, you got to get a job, bro. He went to New York and he was like, not my mayor, and he's an Australian. So, cuz what are you doing? You gotta, I don't know, go to work, man. Just find some work. Or like the other Real Rukshan or Avi. I mean, all of these people, man, all of these merchants selling you these things, if you buy into that, yes, it can be like, I understand. It's a very peculiar quality in human nature where how can I put this? Blaming the outsider, kind of pointing fingers, and even in a way hating and like sort of like projecting this feeling of disgust against the other. There's something soothing in that. There's something, I mean, there's something almost like cathartic in that, in blaming the outsider for the problems in your life and then in your society, which of course affects your life. But the truth is, and here's where I think critical thinking and rationality really matters. Take a step back and reflect on if this like psychological relief that you're getting, if you're following that high of that relief, or if what you're doing actually rationally makes sense. And I would say, yeah, like look at the world, man. Like be a scientist, like empirically observe the world and see what's going on in the US and see if because if you think about it, right? I mean, right-wing politics is really simple. It's really simplistic. There isn't much to even theorize or analyze about right-wing politics. Like the same kind of the same scapegoating mechanism of blaming some minority group that's taking place in the US. It's the same ideology or the same, yes, same concept that's applied to the UK with reform and all of them blaming migrants or Muslims or all of that, or here in Australia blaming mass migration or blaming international students, or then blaming the left broadly or trans people or woke or whatever, right? It's a really simple kind of way of doing politics. But then, so in many ways, you can be a scientist and you can see if that kind of politics ever worked in the US. And the fact that it didn't, or the fact that it's not currently working, and you can see what's unfolding. So take a step back, and even though in the moment it feels good to blame someone, to blame um, some person for some, I don't know, minority for the problems in your life. Don't let feelings follow your decision making. Don't let that feeling of catharsis follow your decision making, but rather read broadly, analyze, theorize, and think critically. And I think the lesson really for me, um, you know, I'm you don't even want to know, man, how grateful I am right now to live in Australia than to live in the US. Because like compared to what's going on there, compared to what I'm seeing on the news, it's like paradise in Australia, even though we recently had a terrorist attack ourselves. But I'm not when it comes to these things, I'm a universalist. I don't think we can ever um sort of shelter ourselves away from what's going on in the world and think that, oh well, it's all going to be okay. Because the truth is, right now this could have take place in Australia in 10 years, who knows. um and that's why I think it's important to think about these matters critically, and never ever let yourself be a victim of the enjoyment of scapegoating. Because there is something, I know scapegoating, because I've personally felt this myself when I was younger, and I mean, maybe I still do, but now I try to be a bit more critical whenever I do feel it. This idea of like blaming the other. I mean, I've done this in a way whenever I feel like I'm blaming and pointing fingers at, like, I don't know, uh the liberals, or the liberals in Australia, the right wing liberals, or Pauline Hanson supporters, or One Nation, I get a sense of relief. But I'm always thinking to myself that these people, the reason they think the way they do is because of their material conditions. It's because of their material circumstances. It's sort of like, let me see if I could find that quote by Marx, the famous. I mean, this is a very important quote. Hold on, let me pull it up. Uh, let's see. All right, here we go. How do I share my screen? Oh wait, present or invite. Share screen. Share screen. That's what I want to see. Can you see that? I probably should add to stage. All right, you can see that now. So this bit here, right? It is not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but what can I read? But their social existence that determines their consciousness. And it's a very simple thesis by Marx, the idea that it is our social existence that dictates our individual consciousness. But I always, try to remind myself of kind of that datum, whenever I feel like I'm going to blame whoever that's on the right or whatever for the problems that's in our society. I mean, and the fact is, because scapegoating doesn't work, and the in many ways, if you take a step back and think about what's taking place in America right now with the ICE shootings, all of that logically flows from the neo-fascist right-wing ideology of I want to say Trumpism, but really right-wing populist ideology of this kind of scapegoating mechanism that we see all over the world. Anyway, look, man, what can I say? Let's hope for better days. But I'm personally rather pessimistic about the whole thing at the moment. Peace, and yeah, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. So it's much needed.